Where on earth is the future of work in an AI-driven world actually heading? And how can we prepare our children for a future in school today? Just before we get into today's eye-opening discussion on why schools must embrace and not ban AI, please take a few seconds to hit follow on your podcast app. It's the simplest way to stay ahead of the technology curve in education. Hi and welcome to the Skills Bridge podcast. I'm Pat Panetta, and with Mindflight 7, who are the immersive education pioneers, Mindflight 7, they've inspired this new podcast where we're sitting with Australia's leading school principals, industry experts and tech innovators to ask the question, where on earth is the future of work in an AI-driven world? Where is it heading? Well, to join us today for that discussion, Brodie McGee is the digital transformation leader from Salesian College in Sunbury, and we're here to discuss why schools need to stop banning AI and start teaching students how to manage, validate, and critique what the machine is doing. And Brodie is here in the studio. Hi there, Brodie.
Hi, good morning, Pat.
Good morning, mate. Thanks for joining us here. So that would be a good place to start. You've done something special at Salesian College, which is embracing AI and not pushing it away.
Yeah, that's right. We've been kind of tracking the industry for a few years now. And when AI started to emerge, we really decided at that time to embrace it, to really understand how we could leverage it. We thought it was not going to be a technology that was going to disappear anytime soon. And so we've really put in the time and effort to make sure that it's a tool that's working for us, not something that's going to be a constant distraction for our community.
So tell us about this tool. So it's my understanding that it's going to allow students to think more deeply and not to distract students. That's the concern.
That's right.
So how have you overcome that?
Yeah, and we've been doing quite a lot of different projects with AI. And so one of the projects that we're very excited about is essentially, in a nutshell, an AI chatbot, but it's much more than that. It's not just a tool that the students can use to have a conversation, but it's a tool that we've purposefully built with a lot of guardrails, a lot of safety and ethics going into the actual construction of it. And we're making sure that at the crux of it, it's also critically engaging our students. It's not something that they can use to offload their thinking. It's something that's going to further the way that they learn.
Schools are banning some AI. That's my understanding on that too. And as I said earlier, you're embracing it. So would I be right to say that?
Yeah, I think so. Around the world, there's been some really interesting takes on the way that different communities and schools should use AI. And in Australia, particularly when tools like ChatGPT and others launched, there was a very big mixed response. We wanted to be a little bit more progressive. Like I said before, we really didn't think this was a tool that was going to disappear. One of the things that we did very early on is we created a framework and a policy that explains to our community, our parents and our students, how we as a school would use AI. And we did that a little bit earlier than most, perhaps. And then soon afterwards, there was the Australian framework on AI in education. And then, because we're a Catholic independent school, the Catholic diocese also came out with their ideas on how schools should use AI. And so over the course of the last few years, we've been really trying to make sure that we're not just making these decisions and applying them to our community, that we're actually listening to our community and we're hearing from them, our parents and our broader community, that they also think that AI is here to stay and that it would actually be doing a disservice to our learners if we were to ban it. And that's actually the line that we want to take with our students as well.
Call me crazy, but AI is here to stay. So if you're turning away from that, you're heading in the wrong direction.
That's right. And the whole purpose of a school is to create these people who are heading into the workforce, they're prepared for the workforce. If we make that decision, if we know that to be true, we would be doing a disservice. If our year 12s graduate this year and they get jobs next year that rely on AI or want AI in their business, we would be giving them an edge by making sure we're not banning it. Where a school that might ban it, they might be doing a disservice.
The concern is that the students will use it to cheat and shortcut. Is that basically the worry?
I think some schools have that worry. I think there are two big categories of worry at the moment. One of them would definitely be safety and ethics. And so are the students talking about things that they shouldn't be talking about? There's a lot of talk in the media about things like AI. I forget the exact term that it's being used at the moment, but where AI is encouraging people to do the wrong thing through kind of these looped conversations. And so a lot of people are very worried about the safety of AI in the conversations. I think then there's also the learning worry that happens a lot, where a lot of parents and community members are concerned that maybe if the students are using AI, then they're going to be offloading those cognitive processes. I think, though, that if you look through history, it's the exact same conversation and the exact same worries that happened when computers came, when Google came, when almost any new technology that really fundamentally shifts the way we use it or use technology, we've had the exact same thing. Yes, it is a worry and it is something that we need to be cognizant of, but it doesn't mean that we don't use it. We use it as much as possible in a safe way with as many guardrails as possible.
Now, Brodie, there's been some changes, recent changes, or something you want to tell us about when it comes to AI and the development of this world that's changing so rapidly. So explain that to me and tell me about any concerns.
Yeah, it's such a developing field of technology that almost feels like every single week there's something that is different. Every time you log into the system, it looks a little bit different or it's got new features. And the media loves to jump on this kind of thing. And every now and then there is something that happens that might be a little bit concerning to people. So I think in the last week or so, there has been a little development in the world of AI that has made some people pause and think, should it be doing that? And so in a nutshell, essentially what happened is that some of the developers at one of the AI companies created a new model and were testing it out. It wasn't even publicly released, and they put it into what's called a sandbox, essentially its own environment where it can live and operate, which is supposed to be separate to the internet. It's not meant to be able to kind of escape the sandbox. And this AI model was particularly so powerful that it taught itself what that sandbox was, but also how that sandbox was coded. And then it taught itself how to break free of that sandbox to the point that it then on the internet found a competitor model, like from a different company, and then hacked that model with no instruction to do that. This AI made its own choice to escape its confines, to find a competitor, and then to infiltrate or hack that competitor. And we've been seeing a little bit more and more of this. You might also know that a different AI company over in the States created a model called Mythos, who the United States government then put an injunction telling them they cannot publicly release that model because it was so powerful that it could also hack these different things. And so there are these types of concerns that are out there. I think that we do need to be aware that the technology has those types of capabilities. What we don't know is what the future is going to look like. And we talked a little bit, Pat, today around how we absolutely need our students to be critical thinkers and to be thinking about their futures and instilling them in the skills that they need. One of the things that our students absolutely need to think about is what type of future they want. And while the technology can be used very purposefully and for very good things, it also needs that human element to decide where those limits are, what is acceptable and what's not. And by making sure that our students know what the ins and outs of these different technologies are, what the limits that they're willing to kind of come across, they're the ones who are going to get to build those technologies in the future.
When I hear you explain that, that says to me even more we need to embrace it in schools because, to prepare for what you just explained there. So don't shy away from it. This is happening, so let's get our students ready.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we try and approach is, and we've talked about it a little bit, is that we'd be doing a disservice to our students where, sure, if there was a global ban, it wouldn't be so bad. But we're actually in this situation where there are certain countries racing ahead into the future and doing as much as they can, where if we were to take the approach of actually put your brakes on and, hey, let's slow down, what it means is that as a country and as a community, we would be falling behind. And in the future, and we already know that this is coming to be true, is that technology is what's going to put us in better situations in the future, whether that's through, economic success or personal success. And we're only going to be doing better for our students if that's what we're going to focus on.
So tell us exactly about this bot that you've built, how your custom bot keeps the students honest, forces them to do the hard work, there's a challenge, and not just sort of, spitting out a history essay in 4 seconds. So how have you overcome that?
Yeah, and we've done it through lots of different layers. So one of the first things that we do, that this isn't I think a lot of your listeners might think of a chatbot and they might think of something like ChatGPT, or there's a million different ones that are available at the moment where, yes, you can kind of jump in there. You can say, write me an essay, and it will spit you out an essay. Ours doesn't do that. So fundamentally, from the ground up, we've built it with a range of different, what we call them, modes that the teachers can enable. So by default, for example, all of our chatbots have what we call the Socratic mode enabled. And any of the teacher listeners would know, so Socratic teaching is a form of questioning. So we're
Socrates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It comes from ancient Greek philosophy.
Yep.
And so rather than when a student goes, what does this mean? Instead of a chatbot that goes, this is the definition of the thing that you're looking for, it might question the student and go, well, what do you think it means? Or where do you think that word comes from?
Right.
Or have you ever heard of this word before?
Nice.
And so rather than giving answers, it pushes back on the student to explain their current understanding. And then it understands that and teases out, well, if you think it means this, if I were to use it in this situation, does that match up with your definition, or is it a little bit different? So we have the first guardrail is it never just gives answers. It questions and it tries to explore what the student already knows and how the student can use that further. The second thing that we've made sure that we do is that when a teacher creates one of these chatbots, the teacher has to put in a range of different documents, including things like their study design, example work that's been marked, so that the chatbot itself is trained and only references content from that course specifically and knows exactly how the teacher would be responding to questions as well. And so that the chatbot itself is as close as possible based upon the way that that particular teacher wants to teach, rather than a generic chatbot that they could just access over the internet that wouldn't be trained on the content.
Now, Brodie, let's focus on the teachers and their world. They're swamped with all sorts of challenges. So tell me about that. Tell me about how your system assists. We spoke about students, but what about the teachers?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So we often talk about our community and, we try and live as one community, but it's obviously made up of a few different groups. We really strongly focus on our students, but it means that we also need to think about our teachers, and we can't be building these systems that put more labor and more onus on the teachers. So teachers are at our front of mind. One of the things that we know is that our teachers are quite time poor. They have so many administrative tasks as well as planning for their lessons and everything else. So one of the big questions that I get asked a lot about the types of systems that we're building, such as this chatbot, is the teachers are already so busy. How can we expect them to learn another tool and to manage another tool? So one of the things that we did when we were building this is we made sure we engaged with the teachers, and we tried to build a system that would in net save them time. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So one of the things that our teachers are using these chatbots for is at the end of each lesson, they're dropping their lesson notes, their lesson plan, photos from the board that they might have written stuff up. They put that into the chatbot so that the chatbot is then not just this generalist about chemistry, but it knows exactly what was taught, when it was taught, and how it was taught. Which means where if a student's missed a class or if a student needs to go home and do revision, they're not talking to the teacher, they're not emailing the teacher, they're not waiting until the next class, but they're offloading that kind of conversation to the chatbot so that when the student comes back to class or at the next class where they see that teacher, the conversations with the teacher are about the next concept or a deeper concept. And what we're already seeing is that the teachers are having not fewer conversations with their students, but fewer of those base level conversations, which frees the teacher up to dive deeper into much more complex or, the next concept that they're wanting to teach. And so we're really, really conscious that we want to save teachers time. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by kind of eliminating the rehashing and recapping and just the repetitive nature that sometimes teaching involves.
Brodie McGee, Digital Transformation Leader from Salesian College in Sunbury, is with us here today with this episode of this podcast, the Skills Bridge. So we spoke about this tool that you've built, this chatbot, challenging students in the right way, assisting teachers as well, which you've just explained. How long has it been in place, and is it all working okay?
Yeah, so one of the things that we try and do whenever we build any system, because we're building quite a few different systems, is we go through a fairly lengthy process of testing. What we don't ever want to do is assume that we were right And then we launched this to nearly 2,000 of our students and then realized we've made a mistake. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're doing a slow release. And so I think at the moment we might have about 15 classes of students using the chatbots in different ways. And we've been doing that for a couple of months now. The feedback so far has been really positive. There are things that we need to kind of fix up and make sure that we do better. But overall, the feedback has been absolutely fantastic.
Wonderful. Okay, that's exciting. Now, the team here at Mindflight 7, who are behind this podcast, now are heavily focused on keeping students secure, distraction-free, and ensuring that they're learning in a great environment. So talk to me about your tool and how Mindflight 7 and the VR immersive experience can, marry and live together happily.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question about how AI and VR can kind of combine together to make an even better thing. At the moment, our chatbots are not VR enabled, but there's huge amounts of work that could be done here. One of the biggest benefits of using something like virtual reality is the fact that it's so immersive. We often talk, when we're talking around virtual reality, about these embodied experiences. We know that learning is not just something that happens in your mind. When you're sitting in a classroom, whether you're comfortable, whether you're anxious, whether there are things that are distracting you, the way that your body is engaging with the environment is really, really important. But what that actually allows us to do with something like virtual reality is to put you into an environment where you can be fully immersed, somewhat distraction-free, and that your mind can really be focusing on kind of one thing at a time. And when we can overlay something like an AI tutor or an AI character into that, they can have a natural conversation with you and further your understanding of concepts, we're actually starting to build this kind of technology that can really help us reconceptualize what individual learning might look like in the future.
That's exciting. That's like another level to what you're doing already with your students.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a few different university groups and researchers who are doing this already. My own doctoral research was in virtual reality and learning. We didn't, in my research, use AI, but even at the end of my thesis, I talked very excitedly about what the future of this might look like. And one of the things absolutely is about the integration of AI and how we could blend the two technologies together.
So, Brodie, the physical experience of being in the classroom, will it change that a lot? So, is it going to replace or just expand what we're experiencing right now?
Yeah, I absolutely think that it's going to expand. So AI is a tool, right? And one of the things that we really try and instill in our teachers is that they have a range of different tools that they can call upon for the right situations. They're the professionals in the classroom and they know the science of teaching and learning. And so AI is one of them. VR is another one. For example, I mentioned before that my doctorate, which is in VR learning, the whole reason I did this is because I used to be a teacher up in the Northern Territory, some of Australia's most disadvantaged children. And I brought my own VR sets to that classroom. And I still vividly remember teaching up there and putting these VR headsets on my students. And these students, the kindest, nicest people, but in situations in quite low socioeconomic areas where they'd never even left their town, let alone the Northern Territory, let alone Australia. And suddenly here they were able to walk around Machu Picchu or Paris or London.
Man, and then blown their mind.
Their minds were absolutely blown. And not only that, but they became so engaged in wanting to learn about those cultures and those places. And it's just, again, an example of how a tool that you might not even think about can absolutely transform a classroom. AI is one of those tools. I think that we need to be aware of it, but it has this potential to completely change the way that our students are engaging with their futures.
Now, our students, what should they be thinking about? So the most important human skill a child needs to develop right now and, ensure they're managing tech in the future when they get a job and they're not competing with that tech. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and there's lots of conversations that are happening around this at the moment. From what I'm seeing and from my perspective, while the technology has changed a lot, over the last 10 to 15 years, we've really had a core focus that our graduates should be critical thinkers. And that hasn't changed. Despite the technology is really advancing a lot, that critical thinking skill is what's still needed. I think a lot of people in the community and from the media are really worried that things like AI are going to start taking people's jobs. I don't think that people should be worried about AI taking their jobs. What I think people should be worried about is people who have AI skills taking their jobs. We absolutely know that more and more businesses are wanting AI level skills. And so our graduates who can critically think about technology and know when to embed AI and when not to embed AI and how to use it properly, they're the students who are going to get the better jobs in the future.
You're obliged to do that, aren't you? I mean, to prepare our students, the way you describe that, I mean, that's what you need to do. If you're not thinking about that, you're really ignoring what's coming.
Yeah, and it's the core of our business where every single day our teachers show up not just to teach content, but to prepare our students for the future. And we very candidly engage our students in these types of conversations as well. We talk to them about what kind of professions they want in the future, what kind of skills they think they need for those professions. And the majority of our students, even students who want to be maybe a pharmacist, a chemist, a doctor, or a builder, or a plumber, or an automotive mechanic, all of them understand the need for technology and AI in the future.
We're going to go into the future now. I want you to imagine 2030. So we're walking into a high school in 2030. The biggest physical change that we're going to see, which will help our children learn in that environment, in that year, say 2030?
Yeah, it's such a hard question for me because if you think of even in the last 5 years, the technology has changed so dramatically. And so when we think about, well, what's coming in the next 3 to 5 years, for us, it's a really interesting thing because you almost visualize that when you walk into this school, there might be huge changes in technology. But I would almost say that we're doing the opposite. So at our school, for example, we know at the heart of learning is relationships, and we absolutely will never take away those relationships between our students and our teachers. We know that that's the reason our students like coming to our classes. One of the things that we would like to be able to do, though, is to free up more time for both our students and our teachers. If we could actually offload some of those administrative processes and kind of the paperwork of learning, we know that our teachers and our students are going to have a lot more time to find the fun and the joy in learning. And that's what we want AI to do. It's not replacing anything. It's actually going to be enabling us to do more of the pieces of learning and teaching that we absolutely love to do.
Sounds great in theory. Are you confident that's where we're going?
I'm pretty confident, yeah. It's going to take a lot of work and a little bit of a redesign and shift in thinking from some of our leaders, some of our teachers, and some of our community members, but we're on the right track and we are absolutely working in a supportive environment of people who love to innovate and try new things.
Now, if a 15-year-old student is listening to this podcast right now and feeling a bit anxious about AI and the fact that, or people saying it's going to take over the world, AI, so your message to them, Brodie?
Yeah, in fact, we've got quite a lot of students at our college who are very ethically minded and they hear a lot of stuff about AI in the media and they are worried. And I think that they have genuine reason to be worried. What I would say to that 15-year-old is engage in conversation with your leaders and with your peers about what that actually means and what that looks like. There is caution about the future. We don't want this thing to run rampant, and we need our young people today to have the confidence to decide what kind of future they want because it's their future.
And as you say, that's the mindset with your students, and that's the way to think about this new world.
Yeah, absolutely. We really want our students, we talked before about being critical thinkers, but they also then need to know how to put that into place, that if they want a certain type of future, there is a way to achieve that. And by kind of instilling in them the skills of doing that, that also means, though, that they need to be critically aware of what is AI and how they can apply it to their futures if they want to. And the best way to do that is to engage in their community.
Thank you, Brodie. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us in the studio here today with our podcast, The Skills Bridge. Wonderful. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you for joining us on The Skills Bridge, and remember to hit follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so you never miss an episode, and leave us a quick review to help other educators find the show. Now, next week, we're shifting gears from AI algorithms to heavy infrastructure. We're joined by Dr. Sandra Gallagher to talk about the green-collar gold rush and why Australia's renewable energy targets completely depend on skilled trades. We'll be breaking down how virtual reality is letting students test drive heavy machinery and trade careers safely inside the classroom without expensive facility builds. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. Until then, visit mindflight7.com.au to see our portable XR labs and AI Smart Hub in action.